My name is Ann Tarts, and I'm the founder of the La Jolla Writers Conference. And I want to welcome you to our Writers Roundtable on Relationships. And I want to tell you that the ladies here, Debbie Macomber and Patty Callahan-Henry and Jackie Michaud, I knew their books before I knew them. I was huge fans of each of them. And then I had the privilege of having them on my radio show. And then I talked each of them into teaching for me at the La Jolla Writers Conference, which should tell you just how generous they are, because they donated their time. They taught and they all keynoted at the La Jolla Writers Conference. So I want to thank you ladies in advance. If you haven't read their books, you probably want to, because they're all wonderful. Very different, very different. Each writer has a different voice, of course, but also different things that they bring to the page. So check out their books. A little about Debbie. Debbie has more than 200 million books in print, and I'm looking at my notes for this because I don't want to miss any points on any of you, okay? Debbie has over 200 million books in print, and it's fair to say that she has found her audience. She's also known as the official storyteller of Christmas because of her Christmas books. And her Cedar Cove series of books has been made into a series for Hallmark. Some of her Christmas books have been made into movies for Hallmark. And now Shania Twain has picked up one of her series, to the Heart of Texas series of books, to create yet another TV series. So welcome, Debbie. And Jackie Michaud is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 12 novels for adults. The Deep End of the Ocean was the first ever Oprah Book Club pick. And that, I think, Jackie, got you off the ground, did it not? You can nod.
Yeah.
And yep. And she's written young adult novels, was the editor of an imprint for young adults, and also a professor, are you not? And and a contributing editor for More magazine, and a mother of how many, Jackie?
9 that I know of.
And a grandma. And Patty Callahan-Henry was a nurse in her former life, right?
Yeah.
And she's now the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of 15 novels, including Becoming Mrs. Lewis, the improbable love story of Joy Davidman and C.S. Lewis. Now, that book has gotten you a lot of critical acclaim, has it not?
Well, I give credit to Joy. Her story has fascinated so many people and had been so untold that, yeah, it's just been a really wild ride with her. But I don't think you could know her at all and not be on a wild ride.
But that is a book about a relationship. And you're the recipient of quite a few rewards, not the least of which is the Harper Lee Distinguished Writer of the Year for 2020.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. You're also the co-host and co-creator of the popular weekly Friends and Fiction Facebook Live show.
Yeah.
And you're a full-time author and a mother of 3, now a grandma. Well, we all know the joy of reading a good book. And I don't know how you ladies feel about it, but as a reader, I feel that while the plot moves the book along, it's the relationship that we as readers have with the characters and the characters have with each other that compel us to keep turning the pages. Because no matter how good the plot is, if you're not vested in those characters, if you're not vested in their relationship with you and their relationship with each other, you're not going to keep reading. So we're here today to talk about relationships because you all do that beautifully on the page. And the first question I have is that writing is such a solitary endeavor, demands you enter a world of your own while you're writing. Mm-hmm. Just how involved do you get with your characters and their worlds? Debbie, let's start with you.
Well, I can say that, you know, when somebody told me it was a solitary occupation, I was really surprised because I've never felt alone because all of those characters surround me. And in regards to my relationship with my characters, I know that when I'm writing a story, if I cry, the reader will cry. If I laugh, they'll laugh. And if I put my heart out on the page, it connects with the readers. And those are my characters. That's what the characters will do for the reader and for me.
I couldn't agree more. Patty, what do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, ditto on Debbie, but I usually say that. But I think a lot about my characters during the day. But not so much like I'm in their world. I'm always thinking about these questions I have for them. For example, when you have a new friend or you're dating someone new, although that's been like 30 something years for me, but you want to know everything about them, their worst childhood memory, their best memory, their biggest heartbreak, their scariest moment. And so I'm thinking about those things a little bit more than I'm thinking about plot when I'm spending time with them. Because the more I know those things about them, the more the plot unfolds. And the number one thing I always want to know about them is their desire. What is the one thing they want more than anything? And once I understand those things, like what they want more than anything and what they're afraid of and what their best memories are, then that drives the story. So yeah, I do hang out with them during the day, but more so with questions than with, oh yeah, my best imaginary friend is having dinner with me, you know?
Same question for you, Jackie. Only, do you formulate your characters first and then your plot, or the plot first and then the characters?
Well, I am the only fiction writer I know for whom plot is the reigning queen. I have to know exactly what's going to happen in my books. Just as if I get on the train in Boston, I have to know that I'm going to get off in Minneapolis. I have to know exactly where these people are going and how they're going to get there. And then along the way, I make things happen to the characters that makes me pity them, care for them, laugh at them, laugh with them, hope that they'll get out of trouble, hope that I can get them out of trouble, and all kinds of permutations of those things. But I never forget that, for me at least, a story is something that happens. It's a story is something that that I can't learn. I can't live every day in my own life, so I have to turn to my love, to books, in order to take me places with something that's going to happen that's epic and unusual and startling, maybe even scary.
Okay, but we've all read books. Now your books are as character driven as they are plot driven. The plot may mean more to you, but they're as character driven as they are plot driven. We've all read books where there isn't that sense of the character, where we don't form relationships with the characters. I don't know about you. I don't care how good the plot is. I can't get to the end of a book like that. I just can't. And maybe that's the place of relationships in our lives. Maybe that just shows how important relationships are in our lives. Any disagreement with that?
Nope.
No, and I think what she said is so important, because I kind of figure it's almost like a train track, right? Both things have to be traveling next to each other to work. And so the plot and the relationships have to be traveling along this story track for us to care at all. Yeah. Because
I'm such a storyteller, I had to learn and figure out a way what stories to tell. I mean, that's just the gift God gave me as a storyteller. And so I came up with words that would help me relate. And that's one of the words, actually: relevant, provocative, creative, realistic, entertaining. And if I have a plot idea that aligns with those words, then I know I've got a good story. And then I create the characters to go along with it.
Oh, I love that.
The process of creating a story in some ways leads to the development of the characters. Yes. Because they spring from that story. They spring from the things that happen to them. If you really want to know, just like a human being, if you really want to know what a person's made of, you have to put that person under pressure.
Yeah.
And that's the same way with characters. You put them under pressure and they become they become what they were destined to become.
Agree.
You know, we've all been under pressure so much lately. I wonder what we're all becoming, but that's another story. Debbie, I believe you have a story about how your husband supported you with a typewriter when you first started writing. Would you like to share that story?
Oh, sure. It was after 2.5 years after I'd been writing. And Wayne he was a construction electrician, and we could count on him working about 9 months out of the year. And he had been out of work for quite a while, and he'd gone in to pay bills. And I was taking $100 a month out of our family budget. So he came and he said, I can't make the car payment this month, honey. I really need you to get a job. Now you have to remember, I'm married as a teenager and I have no job skills. But I had 3 jobs I was going to apply for the next day. But I knew with 4 children in sports and scouts and music and in church and all the different activities, I couldn't work 40 hours a week, manage all of the kids, keep up the house, and be a writer. I was going to have to let go. And remember, I had not sold 1 word. And after 2.5 years, this was already quite an investment. And so I went to bed that night, and my heart was so heavy because I so badly wanted to be a writer and to sell books. And so Wayne woke up about 2 or 3 in the morning and he says, well, honey, are you awake? And I said, I haven't been asleep yet. And he says, well, what's wrong? And I said, you know, I really think I could have made it as a writer. I really do. And he didn't say anything for a long time. And then he sat up and he said, all right, honey, go for it. Now I wish I could tell you I'm just so talented. I sold right away, but it was another 2.5 years.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's an amazing story, and I'm so glad you shared it. So I think that we all have dreams. I mean, your characters have dreams. We all have dreams, and having somebody to support those dreams often is the pivotal point in making them come true.
Exactly.
I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of gumption. But having someone behind me, at my side, and with me makes life a little easier. It just does. How does writing impact your personal relationships? I know you've got to take a lot of time where you don't want to be bothered, where you're in this other world, and you've got to have time to decompress and come back into the real world. So how does writing impact your relationships? Jackie, let's start with you on that one.
I don't take the time to decompress and come back into the real world. I just rush headlong from one into the other. I was thinking when you were just talking about typewriters, my great friend who died recently, Mary Higgins Clark, said that when she got her first typewriter, the most important thing was that it wasn't heavy. Why? Because she had to take it out in the car, in the garage, in order, she, like, as I was a widow, she was a widow in her 30s with 4 children, as I was when she started to write, and the only place she could have any solitude was to sit in her car in the garage with the typewriter. Isn't that a good story?
That's fantastic.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
I guess sometimes it feels as though I'm crossing through the veil when I come back to the real world from spending time in the world that I made up and am the boss of. I'm not a highly literary writer. I don't really think of my characters as being real, and I mean, I know that I'm the boss of them. I know that if I leave them alone to their own devices, they'll just open a beer and eat all the Doritos and not do anything productive. I have to go back in and force them to do the things that I want them to do. But when I come back to, especially years ago, when I wrote my first book, and this is a long time ago, you know, nearly 20 or more than 20 years ago when I wrote my first novel, I would come back and look at my kids and say, don't you realize that I'm an artist and you should treat me better than you do?
Oh my goodness.
But I never said that. They would still be laughing if I said that. But there's nothing that restores you to reality, like one of your teenagers running past the door of the room where you're writing and them saying, look, I know we can get it out of the rug.
Absolutely.
That's so great.
Patty, your take on that?
I definitely can keep my real life and my imaginative life separate. I don't think I don't think there's jealousy, or I don't think it affects my personal relationships, but I think you'd probably have to ask my family if that's true. Maybe they'd answer differently than I would. because I can do that with a certain sense of surety. And sometimes it's very easy for me to leave my keyboard. Sometimes I'd rather alphabetize the spices than try and figure out what the next blank page is going to be filled with. But when it works, and I think this is why we come back again and again, because when it does work and we are inside of a story and it is going, and it is magic. It is, like Jacqueline said, it's like piercing the veil. And it's not, like Jacqueline said, it's not that I think they're real, but I do think in this kind of parallel existence, they're with me. And if, like Jacqueline said, if I leave them alone, for me, it's very much, if I don't go visit them every day, then they're mad at me, and then I can't figure out what to do with them. So there's this touching the story every day and learning more every time you go back. And I don't think it would affect our relationships any more than a job that required, deep work. Deep work is deep work. We either do shallow work and aren't present for it, but if you're really present for the work, I mean, it takes a little while to be present. I can't do it flip-flop like that. It takes, like Jacqueline, it takes a little reorientation.
I kind of have a different perspective on that. When I think the hardest thing for me as an author has been learning the balance between my work life and my personal life. And one of the things that Wayne and I would do at the first of the year is look at times where we would be together and planning our trips and people we would see. And it was also the reason I got an office outside of my home, for the simple reason that I could keep work, and home. And that has been really well. Now my family understands that, I have commitments and work, and they also reap the benefits of that. So they've always been very generous with allowing me to be the writer I am. So that balance is always the hardest thing to find when you have a very active career.
I would imagine it is. I know just with my own work, my husband finally built me an office out in the backyard. He took an old potting shed and turned it into a 10 by 30 office. So I had someplace to go so that the kids wouldn't say, Mom, you're not busy right now. They call me from work. Would you pick up my dry cleaning?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have any sense of the fact that I was working during the day. And now we have, a real office, which I don't go to very often, but I just wondered, I imagine it's a little harder for you when you're working at home and everybody sees that the door is closed, especially in the beginning, but they want a piece of you. And I was just wondering how that worked. The other thing is I had a friend, she was a new writer back when I was new in this business in 1994. And she shared with me that when she got really involved in her books, she would find that when she was grocery shopping, every once in a while, she would think about a character in her book and what they liked and put it in the cart.
Oh, fun. I've never done that.
Yeah, me either.
Me either.
And I thought that was pretty cool. Have any of you ever faced questions or even jealousy from your spouse or significant other or your kids or your friends about just how much time you spend enmeshed in that other world? Jackie, you have?
I have, yes. I mean, not from my spouse. Yeah, I don't think that, people say things to me like, oh, I told my husband we're going to I don't know what they go to, but the country club, something that they were going to go to. And I told my husband I was going to wear the black dress that I got 2 weeks ago. And they said, I don't think my husband even really knows that I have clothes, but my kids were definitely jealous at first.
Were they? How about you, Debbie?
When I started out writing, it was when the kids were little. The youngest was 3 years old. And I had to be able to switch from being the writer to the mom. Mm-hmm. And but I was always able to do that without a problem. I think probably the hardest, when my career started to take off, there was a real strain in our marriage, and we had to work through that. And so it wasn't jealousy. It was just like, remember, I was a teenager. My husband was the head of the house. All of a sudden, I was making more money than he was. And so there was that stress and that strain. But, you know, we worked through it, and we've been married over 50 years.
Oh my
Patty, what
God.
about you?
I'm not sure it's jealousy. I think it might be, but I get the sarcastic comments sometimes, like, "Oh, I know you're really busy," or you know, "I know you probably have a work thing," and that, you know, those kinds of things from friends. If I'm on a deadline or I've disappeared, and I used to try to appease that, and I used to try to explain that it actually was a job. Yes, it's also a vocation. Yes, it's also a calling and a passion, but it's also my job. So when somebody else disappears in their room to do their job, we don't say, "Oh, I know you're so busy with work." We understand it, and I used to try to appease it. I don't anymore. And my friendships have changed, and the people I am friends with have changed because of that. Because I do think it's a difficult thing to understand how someone, even just taking a walk or brainstorming in a notebook, is actually doing your job. So yeah, I think you have to have people in your life who understand what that means, and sometimes that's hard. Especially, Debbie, for you, you were writing right off the bat. I had a different career. I was a nurse.
Yeah.
And then I was not just a mom, but I was a stay-at-home mom. And then this started. So whenever you transition from what people expect you to be to who you become, there's always kind of a bumpy way forward.
Yeah.
You know, this is sort of, it relates in a strange way to invisible disabilities. Because if you have a visible disability, if you've got a cast on your leg or you're walking with a cane, people go, "Oh, how are you feeling?" But if you've got asthma or dyslexia or any of a number of other invisible disabilities, people don't necessarily recognize if you have a limitation in some area. And I had breathing problems for years, from a toxic injury. And I found that my friends who didn't understand that when they wanted to go hiking, I hiked more slowly than they did.
Yeah.
Or if the flu was going around, I was going to stay home more. I found that I changed friends.
Yes.
And my best friend now doesn't dial me during the week. She says to me, "If you want to talk during the week, call me. I know you're always busy at work." How more thoughtful could you be than that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it all ties together in a strange way. All right, relationships permeate all of your books. What are some of the most important characteristics of a good relationship? Let's start with you, Debbie.
Well, see, I think the books, the kind of books that I write are about the people that you would want to live next door to you. And so those characteristics, you know, they have to be like a good neighbor and somebody that the reader is going to identify with, in which they were their neighbor, and they're going to be somebody that they're comfortable with, that they can pick up the book and know that they're going to have a place where they can go, and it's going to be a place where they want to go, and they're going to feel good. So by the time that they end that book, there's a good feeling that's left with them, that they've met characters that have made difficult choices, and at the same time, they have achieved and surpassed what they ever thought they could be as a person.
I love
That's
that.
always so inspirational. What about you, Patty?
I'll just ditto Debbie, but I'll also add, I think,
Don't I get to do that
ditto
once in a
Debbie.
while?
I know I'm gonna get like a little cross stitch that says ditto Debbie. I think because we have similar viewpoints on storytelling, but for me, all of that and relationships are what offer meaning, help us make meaning out of our lives.
Exactly.
Right? They enrich them, right? They help us learn. Okay, one of my favorite quotes is by C.S. Lewis. I know that's shocking, but he says that love and friendship are one of those things that gives value to survival or to living.
Yeah.
And so I try to make sure that any of the relationships in the book that they keep, because we just talked about knowing the right relationships to keep and the right relationships to let go. And I think as women, we're so taught never to let go of a relationship, to fix it, to make sure it's okay, to fix everybody else, and to understand that it's okay to let go of these relationships. So the ones that enrich our lives and offer meaning to our lives and gives value to our lives are the friendships and the relationships that we nurture. And I'm just as interested in these relationship stories and how love shows up and how you want a character that's a good neighbor, but also I'm really interested in how love leaves us and how relationships come undone, and that kind of torment when relationships do come undone. Like I said, as women, sometimes we do everything to make sure that doesn't happen. And that idea that we can make ourselves love what we're supposed to love, instead of really looking at what adds value to our lives. So I'm just as interested in writing about it showing up as how it leaves and comes undone.
Ditto, Patty.
Look at that, Debbie.
And you are. Yeah, you are.
That's awesome.
What stands out in a toxic relationship? Patty, you know, if there is a toxic relationship, what stands out in that for you?
You know, toxic relationships, so we're just going to put aside a toxic relationship that's abusive. That is,
right.
I mean, that's a given. We're not even going to talk verbal abuse, physical abuse, toxic with a capital T. But there's much more subtle toxic relationships. And I think, let me think, a feeling that you must constantly walk on eggshells is a sure sign that you're in a toxic relationship. If you have to twist and contort yourself to someone else's expectations, if you're always worried about their reaction or the expectations of them, that they have for you more than the ones that you have for yourself. If it feels heavy, if it feels weighty, if it feels full of anxiety, if you're only connecting or getting together with yelling and crisis and chaos, that's a very bad sign. So I think those are some of the ones that are like flashing warning signals that we don't always see because they're a little more subtle and we can make excuses for them. Oh, I'm walking on eggshells because I'm wrong. Or I'm thinking more about their needs because I love them. Or I'm trying to become who they want me to be and twisting and contorting because I love them. And those are all sure blue signs that something's toxic, I think.
Oh, I agree. How about you, Debbie?
Well, again, ditto, Patty. But I think that when you're talking about our characters in our books and relationships in those books, that there has to be some kind of conflict. But we would never ever want it to be a toxic relationship in any way. And I think, certainly in the books that I write, I would never have a toxic relationship. It would have to be a mutual and respect.
I think that people need to come to relationships loving themselves, because if you don't love yourself, I don't think you can love anybody else. And I think sometimes in some of the books that I read, there's this journey where each of the characters learns to love themselves a little more so that they can come together from a place of strength.
Yep.
If you don't love yourself, you're going to keep waiting for the other person to not love you. Yep. And that's a problem. All right. Life is full of vicissitudes. Boy, I read somewhere recently that from now on, when something goes wrong, people are going to say, "Oh, it 2020'd."
Yeah.
It's just been that kind of year.
Be over.
We all at some point face fear, despair, anxiety, sadness. How do you make the feelings of your characters, those kind of feelings of your characters, resonate with your readers? And let me digress for a minute. Sometimes when I'm reading a book, I'm so involved in what's going on in that book and with those characters that if the phone rings, I jump. Mm-hmm. And that's when I know I'm reading a book that I really, really want to finish.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that in books. How do you make that in your characters resonate with people? Because to relate to a character enough so that you care about those vicissitudes in their life takes some art. Debbie, I'll go to you first with that one.
Well, you know, this has been a really hard year in so many ways. And I think people are looking for comfort, and they're looking for a place to escape, someplace where they can go, where they're going to feel like they're secure and they can let go of what's going on in the world around them. And so I just think it's so important for us as authors to provide that. There's been this back and forth with many authors that I've discussed, should we bring in the pandemic into our books? And my feeling is no. I think people want to forget it. They want to escape. And I think that's what's important, to offer them the avenue that they can enter into, where they can feel hope and encouragement and inspiration.
Yeah. Debbie, it makes me think of, there's this huge slew right now. It started, I'm not an expert, but maybe 5 or 6 years ago with World War II books. And I know there were some before that, but there really has been a renewed and vigorous interest in World War II. And look how long it took for us to dive into that after the fact, right?
Yeah.
Who wants, I don't want to read about the pandemic next year. Well, at the rate we're going, we're still going to be in the pandemic next year. And I kind of laughed when you said it's been a really hard year, and it's August. We still got a few months to go.
I know.
It's crazy. So as far as how do I make the feelings of my characters resonate with readers, I think by just tapping into my own fears and despair and anxiety and sadness, being open to feeling that, so that my characters and my readers can feel it. I mean, what is this saying, that the universal is always in the particular? So if I can bring that up in myself and then build towards meaning and hope, then I've tapped into the real thing. So,
and I think there's a lot we have to say about self-care during this time.
yes.
We have to take care of ourselves. And for me, the first thing that I do in the morning is seek out truth and the source of life and goodness, and read my Bible and set my own day so that whatever comes up, I'm prepared. I have like this shield around me. And that, I really believe this self-care is just so important right now.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right. I had a client who was a meditation expert, and I said to her, I never have meditated, because I always thought the idea of meditation was sitting there with your legs crossed and going, Om, I didn't know what meditation was. And she said to me, well, how do you start your day? And I said, well, for more than 30 years, I've started my day a half an hour before I get up out of bed. And I usually get out of bed at 5 or 5:15. I said, I lie there awake and I wait until I'm in my happy place. I think of all the good things in my life.
Wow.
And when that brings me to my happy place, then I get up for my day. And she said to me, that's meditation. I never knew that that's what that was, but that's a practice I've had for over 30 years.
Wow. It's beautiful.
What are you doing for self-care, Patty? I even do it at the La Jolla Writers Conference when I do the 7 a.m. classes.
Yeah, I'm there, aren't I?
I know.
Same as both of you. I think that there's tremendous value in, I no longer get up and check the news and check my Facebook feed and check my email and my texts, because then you start your day with this adrenaline rush in the chaos that you can't fix.
Right.
You can't. So if we can bring ourselves to center, and spiritually, mentally, physically, and then enter the day from that spot, we're going to get bounced all day, especially right now, left to right and right to left. But at least we can start at center. Maybe the rest of the day can be a little bit better. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was a bit paralyzed. Both my sons were sent home from college, so they were living with us again and doing school. I couldn't get to my daughter and my granddaughter because, the travel restrictions. And I was checking the news constantly, and I was like, when is it going to end? And then came this, not peace might be a strong word, but this knowing that I wasn't going to fix it. And my mindset and my spiritual centering were as important as anything else if we were going to move forward in this. And then I started writing again, and then I started reading again, and then I started coming back to center. But yeah, in the beginning, I was knocked off my axis pretty good.
Were
I
you,
think we
Debbie?
all were. Yes, I think we all were. I mean, I had to literally close my office and send the staff off to work digitally, and Zoom became part of our lives, but it's been really good. My husband and I, which we have never spent this much time with my husband before,
Yeah.
because he's retired, and I'm really enjoying this time with him. I have my own little office here, and I'm finding I'm writing more. And,
Wow.
so there aren't that many interruptions. So
Yeah.
I get more
Yeah.
done.
I think that making lemonade from lemons is an art form. I
Yeah.
think that as we get older, we're better prepared to do it because we've been through more, and we know that you usually come out the other side stronger and better in some way.
Yep.
And so I think that maybe it's something that develops as you mature, but if you can do it, when you can do it, I think it's a real strengthening thing to do. All right. Well, we just answered my next question about how do you deal with the stress in the world.
Yeah.
I think loving your loved ones is really important. My daughter and son-in-law have been chosen by a birth mother to adopt, and she's due August 20th. They are in Florida, she's in Arizona, and somebody needs to take care of my 8-year-old grandson in between. And so my husband and I are figuring out, do we fly to one hot spot, or do we fly to the other hot spot to welcome this new baby and take care of my grandson? And I think a lot of people are up against this kind of thing right now. And I think you've got to step back, and if you believe in God, you've got to look for some guidance. If not, you've got to look for guidance from inside yourself. But people are facing all kinds of dilemmas right now. And it's a funny thing. During the Depression, book sales and movie ticket sales went up. And I read somewhere recently that book sales are up right now. I think people curling up with a good book is a wonderful way to escape what's going on. Well, what do you hope, and I'm going to ask you first, Debbie, what do you hope your readers take away about relationship when they read your books?
Well, I'm hoping that they will have good, positive feelings about it, that when they close that book, that they feel that this was such a great story, that they can identify on so many levels with the heroine, that no matter what is going on around them, that they have that sense of peace and inspiration and hope. That's long ago, I had to make, I had taken this class, an online class about creating a mission statement. And it took me months to come up with it, because I thought of all the things I wanted in my career. I wanted, to be on tour. I wanted books. I wanted movies. I want. And I thought, that's not what I want my career to be about. I wanted to give something, not take something. And so it isn't surprising I found my mission statement in scripture, but it is from Genesis, where God makes his covenant with Abraham, and he says, I will make you a blessing. And that is my mission statement, for that my books would bless the readers, that they would come away with such a heart full of hope, that they can face whatever is going on in their lives.
That's beautiful.
Wow. I'm not answering.
There's some people who are hard to follow, but
I know, right? Just
Yeah.
stop doing that to me. I think what I want them to take away, well, first of all, I want them to take away what's most important to them, right? What hits them right in the heart. But I have to have some idea of what that is when I'm writing, of course. I want it to enrich their lives, which I guess is the same thing as saying I want to be a blessing. I want the books and the transformative journeys in the book to enrich the reader's life in a way that transforms their life, even if it's something tiny. I don't mean dropping your life, with the C.S. Lewis, with the book Becoming Mrs. Lewis. I always say that, because she packed up and moved to England, I always say, we might not all need to pack up our bags and move to England and take our kids, But we might all need to pack up the expectations that other people have for our lives and who and what they want us to be. And so I want my readers to take away a nugget or something that they tuck away in their heart and say, I might not need to pack up this, but maybe I need to pack up this. One of my favorite poets' name is David White, and he has this line about questions, and I'm probably going to mangle it, but it essentially is that we should ask beautiful questions, and those questions can either make or unmake a life. And I kind of like to think about stories that way, you know, that stories can make or unmake a life, and I want them to do good in someone's heart.
Those were beautiful answers.
Yeah, I agree.
As a reader, I want to come away from a book with what you said, Patty. Sometimes, Debbie, I want to feel better about life when I finish reading a book. But the very least I want to come away from a book with is an aha moment.
Yes.
That aha moment.
Mhm.
You two ladies write very different stories. Jackie writes different stories from the two of you. But I find that when I read your books, there's always an aha moment at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can get that as a reader, and I've enjoyed getting to that point, really enjoyed, I've been involved, and I want to know more about the characters, and they're alive for me while I'm reading the book, then I'm happy. And I never have less than 7 books waiting to be read on my nightstand.
Oh, wow.
I love reading. I'd rather read than do, people say, what's your hobby? And I say, reading.
Reading.
What else? Well, I bake some. People have these wonderful hobbies that I'm so jealous of. I'm happiest curled up with a good book.
Well, I know Debbie knits, and
Yes, I'm a passionate knitter, and passionate cook, passionate about my family, passionate about my relationship with God. I have a lot of passions.
there you go. But I always feel bad when people ask, and so what else do you do besides write? And I'm like, read.
Yeah, reading too. Oh yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, so many books.
All right, I think this is it. Do you have anything else you want to say about writing?
No.
I'm just so grateful to be an author. I thank God every
Grateful.
single day that I have the opportunity to do what I love most.
I'll end with ditto, Debbie.
All right, I do have one last question.
What is it?
When it's like becoming an actor, when people are starting out writing, I know an awful lot of writers who've said that people said to them, why don't you get a real job? Or something to that effect. People looked at them and said, you don't have any chance of success. What kept you going in spite of that? Whichever one of you wants to answer.
I think just pure stubbornness. I wasn't going to give up. I wanted this, and there were lots of people all through my life, because I'm dyslexic, that I had lots of negatives. The 3rd grade teacher told my mother, Debbie's a nice little girl, but she is never going to do well. I didn't learn to read to the 5th grade. The first person I ever told I was going to be an author was the principal of my high school. And I went to a Catholic girls' school, and she interviewed each one of us girls before we graduated to ask what we saw for our future. And I told her, I'm going to write books. And she had the most hitting look in her eye. Mm-hmm. And she said, I want you to go home, and I want you to think very seriously about this, Debbie. Now, what she was really saying is, I really think you need to do something in line with your intelligence level. Because I barely graduated from high school. I was always at the bottom of my class because I struggled so hard through school. School was horrible for me. I'm just so grateful that I could rise above that now.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. And
Yeah.
Patty?
I think, it was pure persistence. I think I was my own worst enemy in the beginning, because I didn't decide to start writing until a second career, until later in life. And I was taking classes, but not telling people what I was doing. I felt like I was saying, I want to be an astronaut. It just seemed so out of reach.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, there was no doubt that I was going to the moon. So it was this like really weird cognitive dissonance of, I'm not going to pass the astronaut test, but I'm going to the moon. So it was persistence, and it was a kind of inner fortitude that has served me well, because writing, and especially entering the writing world, is really tough sometimes. You have to be able to take negative reviews and criticism, and you have to be able to take rejection, and you have to be able to take constructive criticism. And I think it was just this pure, and maybe Debbie and I have talked about this before, maybe it is purely a calling. And when you know it's a calling, you just keep doing it.
Yeah. When I started out, this reminded me, it's so funny. I was just the opposite, Patty. I was telling everybody, I'm going to be a writer. I'm a writer. And in my Christmas letters, I would proudly tell everybody how many rejections I got.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I just was so excited to be able to do this, to sit down and write books. And in fact, it was all my Christmas letters that encouraged me. People say, you really ought to be a writer. You're funny, So.
Oh, Debbie, that's amazing. I remember when I sold my first book. This was 20 years, about 2002, I sold my first book. My first book came out in 2004. And I told all my friends, and I was having this big launch party, and they were upset with me. I wouldn't say mad, but they were upset with me that I had been so secretive about it. But I had been really secretive about it because it felt almost too big to say.
Yeah.
And so we all had to kind of get over the hump of that I was so secretive about it. Mine was like yours, Debbie. It didn't happen in a year. That story of I wrote a book, I sold it, I became a New York Times. That's not my story.
Oh, mine either.
Not my story. So, I wrote probably from the time I said I was going to write one book. From the time I said I was going to write one book to the day my book came out was almost 5 years. So I was secretive about it almost the whole time.
Wow.
How long did it take you to get published with your first book, Dave?
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years from, and then it was another year before the book came out.
So you both had a dream. You were both persistent. You both believed in yourselves. I think that's such a huge lesson for anything we want to do in life. For writers, we had we had 3 keynotes one time. Debbie, I think you were one of them. And I think John Lesquois was there. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yep. And I sent an email to each of you saying, what is the topic of your speech going to be? And you each sent back some variation of 20 years to overnight success.
Yeah.
It was some variation of, what the road to success was about. And I say that all the time to writers. You're not going to make a living as a writer to replace a good living until your first 5 books have done well. And people don't understand that. But in anything you do in life, it takes persistence, follow through, and belief in yourself.
Yeah.
I think. And the work. You've got to do the work.
The daily work. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both very, very much for being with us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having
us. It was so fun. And Jackie, I'm sorry you had to go.
Yeah, me
Missed
too.
you, Jackie.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Internet.